Well, we'll say welcome to Mainstream. This is not a teach by definition group. It's not a timing or definition type thing either. We're more interested with this thing is how you keep your dancers after they've got into Mainstream. Do you have Mainstream clubs? We have a motto in our area, good teaching is far-reaching. And I believe Al is taking that as his theme to talk on it. We have three very widely spaced, I would say, panel members. Closest to me is Elmer Sheffield from ESP Recordings. I'm sure you all know them. Al Stevens from the European area. I'm not just sure where in Europe. He never tells us. Germany, okay. And then Mike Seastrom on the far end from the California area. Some of the questions that I asked these fellows to talk about, and by the way, I'm Martin Mallard from Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. One of those Canadian types. Was the retention after class? Should you teach history in your classes so that your square dancers know something about where square dancing came from? Why the rush to plus? What do your executives in your clubs do to you as a caller to demand that your dancers go on? How do you handle it? Just to give you an idea of my own background, Mainstream in our area is 80% of our dancers. If we field a Mainstream dance, we will get anywhere from 20 to 30 squares easily. If we field a plus dance, we will not see more than 10 or 15 squares. We teach 35 to 40 weeks through our winter season. Through our summer season, we carry once-a-week dances for our Mainstream level, so as to keep them still, sharp, and dancing for the fall. We encourage them to guest at other classes and at special dances we hold through the season for them. All our callers in our area are members of our club executives. We do not have caller-run clubs. We have caller-run classes. We do teach by definition, not quite as deeply as the people here would like us to, but we have been teaching by definition for the last 25 years. Myself, I have one club that's been dancing for 5 years on the first 45 basics. We have 2 classes per year. I have 1 plus club and 2 Mainstream, which do the quarterly selection. All I'm here for, though, is to keep you on the subject and to keep each one of these fellows on the subject. And I believe Mike is our first man up. We're going to give each one of these fellows a chance to talk, and then we're going to open up the floor for discussion. Come on up, Mike.
Mallard, I believe the first area that we were talking about, or at least discussing to talk about, was the dancer education part and providing a proper dancer education, not only in the area of square dancing and teaching them how to dance, but teaching them the other aspects of the activity, the philosophy and the perspective of the Mainstream or of square dancing in addition to the square dance basics. Certainly teaching by definition is one important aspect of the class. The other one is teaching your dancers the art of listening, because the art of listening, of course, makes a heck of a difference in their dancer education. The other thing that has been talked about before is teaching your dancers formation awareness. So in addition to teaching them the basics, you're also teaching them formations, and you're also giving them a chance to, as dancers, recognize those formations as they dance. The other thing is teaching them timing, and of course the point that Martin talked about just briefly is, should we be teaching the history of the activity with our classes? I think it's always a good time to stop and pause at the mic and give your dancers a brief bit of history if you can, whether it's just a piece of music that you're using, or whether it's a history of music in general, or whether it's a small piece of tidbit of information about the history of our activity at a particular time period. So I think these things are important. I also think styling in your classes is important, as well as etiquette. Teaching the dancers etiquette on the dance floor as well as off the dance floor. And the other point is actually trying to encourage your dancers to find additional dancing experiences rather than just your own class. One of the most helpful things is if the callers in your particular area can exchange information on each other's dances when they're having three-quarter dances, halfway dances, whatever they be, and exchange that information so that this fellow's class over here attends this function and the vice versa, and aid those dancers in getting a maximum number of times out there dancing to different callers. It improves their experience and I think maximizes their enjoyment in the activity. Above all, I think we're talking not only about getting through the material and teaching them all this dancing by definition and the art of listening, but we're talking about having a good time, and that's probably the bottom line for the well-rounded dancer education. Martin, we want to go on and talk about club transition, or?
Go ahead. You've got 10 minutes.
I've got 10 minutes. Okay.
It gets interesting.
How about 10? Okay. The other thing we were talking about, or a lot of this, I think, was covered at the Reno convention. The other part that we would apply to our discussion here is the transition from class to club. Now, whether you have a mainstream club or whether you have a plus club, I think there's a certain amount of transition that all dancers go through. And if they understand the philosophy of square dancing and they have square dancing in perspective, that they get a much better chance of enjoying the activity to its maximum and succeeding wherever they choose to go, no matter what their point of involvement be. Some people have a lot more time to become involved in the activity on a quite a bit more number of nights a week. And if they choose that type of involvement, then they may go farther into the level system than someone else who maybe only has a chance to dance twice a month. And I think dancers should know that ahead of time, or as they're going through the activity, that if they choose to become involved only lightly and only occasionally, that there is no need to rush through the levels, and that we as callers should provide the leadership to those people so that they will have a place to dance, so they don't feel like they should have to follow the rest of the class off and join a plus workshop or rush off to this club or that club, that we as callers recognize the fact or give them the guidance that if they only have a chance to dance a couple times a month, that they have a place where they know they can go and dance and enjoy square dancing to its maximum. So that's maybe an encouragement through caller leadership to appeal to these people not to rush ahead and to proceed at their own pace. The other thing is I think we need to help some of the dancers who are going multiple times a week and a month and give them a chance to enjoy all the facets of the activity so that they don't on the other end of the coin pick up that ever-present thing that we've seen over the years called new dancer burnout, where they go and go and go and go and constantly until they just entirely burned out and they don't enjoy all the facets of the activity, whether it be the rounds, whether it be the quadrilles, whether it be the contras, whatever it be that other aspects of the activity. They're just channeled in one way, and that burnout comes. The other thing is I think is caller leadership is discouraging that ever push for square success that we seem to have with some new dancers. Some new dancers are obsessed by square success, and I think we as callers can keep the fun in it by joking and keeping that obsession from becoming a major part of a dancer's focus. And I think, once again, this is probably caller leadership. The other thing is as new dancers are being into your club, if you have that kind of control, or if you have that kind of leadership control over a club, is give these people a chance, the new dancers, to have, say, one host couple in a club, to guide those dancers, to, if they miss a few times, to call them and say, "Guy, we're thinking about you, and we'd like to have you come to our next dance. It's going to be a potluck." And in other words, have a host couple include these people as a way of letting these people know that you're thinking about them. The other thing is a lot of these people that graduate from class and right into the clubs immediately pick up this tremendous amount of responsibility with the clubs. All of a sudden they're bringing refreshments, and this one's sitting on the door taking money. And I think we ought to make it maybe a policy, or callers ought to provide the leadership to the clubs to say, listen, back off these guys. Let them enjoy the time dancing, this new time. Let them get involved in the fun of the activity, and then share the responsibility sometime down the line. The only other area that touches me is the transition of new dancers to club members or active square dancers on a regular basis is to avoid the hard sell of square dancing. To take that person that's just learned and say, "Boy, now we're having such a good time. Now you go out and get 3 or 4 neighbors and you get them in this hall next week." I think that we ought to do the soft sell approach where we're having a good time, and if you're having a good time, bring your friends, but we don't have to drive it down their throats. So This is just my feelings on not only the well-rounded dancer education, but the class-to-club transition. And I think we as callers can provide that type of leadership to our dancers, whether there are dancers or whether you're actually working in a club setting where you're the caller for the club and the club is making a lot of the policy decisions. I think some questions that you need to ask yourself when these people ask you, where should I be dancing next? Should I go on to the plus level? Should I stay here and dance along with this club? I really enjoy this. I can only dance so many times a week. Some of these questions, I made a little bit of a list of these questions, and the one was, first of all, ask yourself or let your dancer answer the question, and you can ask your dancer, is this the first year after your graduation? Is this the first year involved in square dancing? And if that person says, yeah, this is the first year I'm involved in square dancing, I think that we ought to encourage them to go easy and go slow. Although we all have seen dancers that are so hot shot and they're so involved in the activity, they're quick to pick up things, and maybe their place is to go on to another phase of the activity or to pick up round dancing or whatever. The other thing to ask these dancers is, how many times a month do you usually go to square dancing? Can you square dance 3 or 4 times a week? Do you like to square dance 3 or 4 times a week? Or because of the involvement in your kids' Little League and your daughter's Girl Scouts, can you only square dance twice a month? And I think if those questions help a dancer make the decision how far he wants to become active in the activity. The other thing is in your area, do your dancers, or do these dancers that you have this type of leadership control over, do those dancers normally dance to one caller all the time, or do they dance to a multitude of callers? Because I think it's easier for a dancer that dances to a multitude of callers to adapt to a broader range of dancing than a dancer that just dances to one caller all the time. There's a tremendous amount of security for the new dancer that dances to one caller, and I think we shouldn't belittle that situation at all. But I think on the other hand, that a dancer who dances in a wide area to a wide number of callers picks up more dancing experience in the long run and can maybe find interest in other areas of the activity as well. The other thing I think that's kind of interesting to ask your dancers occasionally is rate the following in order of importance to you. I square dance because, or I like to square dance because A, the social interaction, B, the mental stimulation, C, the fun, or D, the physical activity. What's more important to you in this activity? I think everybody square dances for various reasons and various order of importance, and that's maybe something that your dancers can look at and evaluate their involvement in the activity on that basis. Okay? All right.
Thank you, Mike. Next fellow is Al Stevens from Germany.
Sprechen Sie Deutsch? 9, 8, 7. Hi, I'm Al Stevens, and I was perfectly calm and at ease until Mr. Flippo walked in. Now unlike most callers, for the last 22 out of my 24-year calling career, I've been associated with the United States Air Force. And through the military, I've had the opportunity to reach a lot of people in a lot of different geographical locations. 90% of my experience in square dancing has been with mainstream level, mainstream dancers. And I feel that we have the train on the right track now, and I sure hope we can keep it headed downstream in the same direction that we're going now. The topic that I wanted to discuss was, or touch on briefly, was mainstream variety in, or choreography variety in at mainstream levels. How many people here teach basic classes? That's about 99% of them. What's wrong, Hank? You don't teach class? He just got back from, he's Navy. The cornerstone for our square dance program lies with our students. And getting off on the right track and the proper teach, to me, is paramount in achieving our goal of good mainstream dancers at graduation time. In our particular area now, we have a big problem in that the European, the German side of the house, the German people believe in taking their vacation between June, July, and August. So consequently, most of our classes start either after they come back from vacation or just prior to going on vacation, an accelerated type course, which is a pain in the butt. Thank you. Some of the ways that I like to play with the mainstream people after they graduate and they're in the club, things that I like to do are look at various movements from a peel-off position or from a completed double pass-through position, adding a little variety to our regular mainstream program. How many people have used peel-off? Does everybody use peel-off? That's about 99% of them again. How many people have used from a completed double pass-through position, girls only, peel-off? And see what type of a setup you get. Boys quarter right. Every person circulate. Boys bend to a two-face line. Working within the parameters of our mainstream program, we can come up with some very interesting choreography using variety. Caller, when teaching, looking back to teaching, when teaching an Alaman bar star, how many people teach the centers back up and the ends walk forward? We all know that. But how many people concentrate on who sets the tempo? Do you let the outside person set the tempo? Instead of telling the inside person in the Alamandar star formation, instead of telling the inside person to slow down, do you allow the outside person to kind of push the inside person along? Elmer, do you?
I say push or drag your feet, as the case may be.
Push or drag, right? I found one thing very interesting when examining the definitions of our basics. That one interesting thought occurred to me on wheel and deal. I was taught many years ago that on a wheel and deal, the right-hand person wheels in the face and the left-hand person wheels around behind. Okay? Which works from back-to-back lines, we all agree. But it doesn't work from facing lines nor two-face lines. I found one interesting thing on teaching wheel and deal through experience. We have ends, we have centers of each line formation. The centers of the pivot points, they're the fence post. The ends are can be related to the gate, and you close the gate type effect. I didn't really want to take too much of the thunder. I'd like to leave some of the topics for Elmer to touch on. I found one item that I've circled here. The transition from club to class. At graduation time, I found that there's always a drastic gap in level. The club level is extremely higher than the dance level of the class at graduation time. And I think a lot of this is based on experience, the experience factor. They may know, the students at graduation time may know the movements. They may be able to stumble through the basic movements, the mainstream movements. But that gap between club level and class level can be shortened considerably by utilizing a few extra weeks after class in a workshop environment prior to graduation, if you will, and bridge that gap quite a bit. I found that to be a very successful tool. Instead of graduating them 25 or 30 weeks or whatever the duration of our area is suggesting, I tend to keep my people in class a lot longer, and bridging that gap between class and club at graduation time. And without further ado, does anybody have any questions?
If you do, hold them till after Elmer's through.
Okay. Hold them for Elmer. Thank you.
Very well said. I'm Elmer Sheffield, as Martin said earlier, still Elmer Sheffield. And I don't really have anything in particular to talk on other than just to underline some of the same things that Mike and Al have already said to you, and then probably would we get into some questions and answers, and then we can see kind of what you are interested in. But the one thing that I'll just kind of underline that they both have said is that mainstream, of course, is the backbone of the square dance activity. Everyone starts, as being not a dancer at all, and of course the mainstream program is the first one. And as callers, we should really work at being sure that our dancers are well taught, as we've already said, and be sure that they do have fun. The first year is, I think we all agree, is usually the one that kind of decides whether a dancer is going to even stay a dancer, because if they don't enjoy for the first part of it, and we don't, we try to be sure they have a good time in the activity, and that they do learn to dance, then they're not going to be dancing long enough to become a plus dancer or an advanced dancer or anything else. I think that it's important that we assure them and let them know that the mainstream program is not I don't know a good word for it, but yeah, we don't want them to think that that you're just a mainstream dancer, you're way down at the bottom of the list, because dancers do have different degrees of interest. Some dancers, as Mike was saying, they can dance twice a month. Some dance every night, and then we have pressure from experienced dancers who are already into other programs, and they're saying, "Come on, you got to get in here and do Relay the Deucey and this kind of stuff." So, as callers, teachers, we need to really be sure that these people realize that if they never become any more than a mainstream level dancer, that's great. That's a good place to be. Of course, good judgment on our part will take care of that. There was one. Of course, I'm interested in music a lot, as you well know, because I produce records and I like for y'all to use them. And I think that maybe this is a good place, really, to think about when you're dealing with new people, or even after they become dancers and have graduated. Is think about little different kinds and varieties of music to maybe add a little spice to the dance. Some of my songs are some people haven't approved of them. One or two had sexy old lady in there or something like that, but I hope that's all right with you. But anyway, think about these things when you're teaching your dancers, and be sure that they have fun every night. And as we all know, you can take the mainstream program, and there's enough stuff right in there to keep people dancing forever, and to keep them having a real good time. They don't have to feel pressure to move on into the plus groups. They need to dance a while and really become good dancers at that level before they move, and they should feel like that this is acceptable to us. Don't even as callers, we don't want to make them feel like they've got to move ahead and just rush right through the program. And really, the ideas that they've already presented are the same thoughts that I have too. So I'll just turn it back over to Martin, and maybe we can get a little question and answers from y'all.
I have a few questions that I would like to ask, and maybe perhaps Jack Murtha would like to have some of these answers too as time goes on. How many of you actually teach the total mainstream list? I hope you're all being honest. That's 100%. How many of you actually teach it in the order that it is listed? I was wondering about that myself, because we do teach in quite a different order than what they have there, but I think that's an area of consideration too. Have we any particular questions from the floor? Would you give your name and your... Okay.
Paul Brody from Fair Lawn, New Jersey. On the subject of class to club and the gap. I don't know what other parts of the country do, but in our part of the country we don't do this. And I was wondering if there's what comments you might have about it. Why shouldn't it be that the mainstream clubs in the area teach the classes and the plus clubs teach plus workshops? Why should plus clubs be teaching classes and then telling their people they can't dance unless they rush real fast and learn all the plus clubs? We have, I can think of one club in our area that's really an advanced club that, thank God, they finally stopped giving lessons, because everybody that took lessons in that class could never dance in that club. They had to go out and dance someplace else, and some people were very, very dissatisfied. So on that, I don't know if it's a new concept, at least to our area it's a new concept, that the mainstream clubs give the lessons, and there is no gap. At least in our club there'd be no gap. One of the clubs that I call for, after they finished lessons, they'd know, well, not as much, but they, as far as the different types of positions and all that, there's still more to learn, but they would know almost as much as the people that are already in the club. And the plus clubs would be the same way. They'd be taking people who have been dancing mainstream for a while and giving them plus workshops, and then when they graduated from the plus workshops, they'd be in the plus club.
I answered that question, man.
Sure, right ahead. Would you use the microphone, please?
I have something else. John Toth, Milwaukee. The question that came about over here, why do the advanced clubs do this? Okay, I'm going to get too far out on that. But it also has been in the past in history that the advanced clubs were parasites. They ate up things that we other callers down below have progressed up the line, whatever. And it came about to the point where say, hey, why don't you start a class? Why don't you develop it? Why are you becoming such a parasite? And I was just up, hey, yeah, okay, we'll start a class. But they don't have the transition going through. That's just one of the questions I've answered. Sure, have a little rebuttal. Come on, up there. All right, come on.
It's sort of always been my theory, and I don't know how well thought out it is, but if this is a brainstorming session, I've always thought of why can't square dancing be like baseball? You've got minor leagues and major leagues. And I realize that connotation may not be the right thing to say, but I can see that. But there are people that the only concept that is not so good is that everybody in the minor leagues in baseball wants to become to the major leagues. So that part of it I'm not in favor of. But you could have mainstream clubs and people could dance there as long as there was good caller leadership and they provided interesting programs. There will be a lot of people that would want to continue to dance there, and others may not, and they would go to plus clubs.
Okay.
Dance club.
The question I had is the transition that we were talking about, Martin, going from one to another. I am a freelance caller, and I've been in the business for many years. Who cares about the years? But wherever I go, all of a sudden I hear so many people from this club, and 5 couples independence. And I go from another place, I say 10 couples independence, 20 couples independence, 30 couples independence. I said, what kind of club is that? Never heard of the Independent Square Dance Club. 1776 Square Dance Club? No. They are people who got through their classes. They went to the club activity. They got there and they heard the SMs. You know what SMs are? Screaming minorities. And they're the ones with the big loud voice. They scare half the people to death, the new people especially. They come in and say, hey, our instructor was saying, hey, this is fun. This is a recreation. Enjoy it. If the politics gets too heavy, leave it and find something else. And he said, John, I heard these people, it's unreal the way they backbite each other. And what they say about their caller is unreal. And yet they're supposed to be brotherly love. Oh my, isn't this wonderful kissy stuff? Yeah. And this is the thing. And he says, we don't want no part of it, John. We're leaving. We're becoming an independent. And this fraction is growing so big in our country, it's unreal. Great for the independent caller, like myself. We did. Some places that are all caller run. Some places are or executive or club caller run. This is the thing. Well, we have all these situations that happen, but this is the happenings, the unrest that we have in the country right now, and this transition of getting our people through from classes to club activity. There's somewhere where we have to temper our executive people in our club groups, whatever, to say, hey, you're driving these people out of your clubs and keeping them in. Let's hear some of your ideas on your transition.
I have a rather tall man back there and I'd like to say something. Marshall, but you've got to come up here. Or I can repeat it if it's a single question, but if it's a long talk, I'm not going to try and talk like a Texan.
I'd like for you, Martin, if you would kind of expand on your way in Canada. I've always was impressed with the way you Canadians, I know you've had your dance levels up there longer than we have or ever thought of having. And I was always impressed from your the way you transited dancers over into the higher level, and why they always didn't rush into the higher level or wanted to rush into. I don't know what y'all do, but would you expand on it a little?
Thank you, Marshall. There was one phrase used here that I find rather untasteful. The high-level clubs accused of being parasites. I think square dancing does have a place for all levels of square dancing. And it is so in our area. And I would say, generally speaking, in Canada. I have been fortunate enough to travel right across Canada. But if a high-level club, and high-level in our area is usually about a A1, if a high-level club sponsors a beginner class, they do not, in our area, expect to have those dancers dance with them. We have an amazing cooperation in the Canadian field of square dancing, right across Canada, between all our callers and all our dancers. And this is one of the things that, Johnny, is it? I was rather shocked to hear that type of statement from a caller. And I'd be even more shocked to hear it from our dancers. When we decide to put something on, it's not something that one caller does or one dancer does. It's something that's done cooperatively. You heard John talking, well, those of you that are up in mainstream, John got up and he made me feel rather good because he's just fresh back from Saskatoon doing a weekend up there. And what he said really was true. We can field dancers at all levels, and our mainstream, our high-level dancers, our beginner dancers will dance together. If we field a dance specifically for the newcomer, our A1 dancers are there. Our angels in our beginner class, believe it or not, are from our top-level club. We didn't ask them to come. They come on their own. They are in the process now of graduating and guesting around the area. The dancers asked them where they should dance, and they told them to go to a mainstream club, took them out to the club, guested them there, and they will probably be dancing in a mainstream club in the fall, in the one that they took them to. This is the type of cooperation that we should see. We in Canada are rather fortunate because we have a 49th parallel, and it's an amazing filter. We come down here to CALLERLAB, we hear the things that go on, we talk to the callers and say, gee, I don't think we'll do that. That's maybe an unkind statement, but it is in a sense true. We have had the fortune to learn from other people's, not mistakes, but errors or speed or whatever you want to call it. The transition from club to class. We have one club that is unique. We have a singles club. It's one that we're very proud of. It's been going for 25 years. It is a perpetual beginners class. People come into that club in the fall and learn to dance, and sometimes we never see them again because young people, being what they are on the move. We have had 180 marriages in the club in 25 years. Those people have graduated and gone into square dancing. Then most of them are still dancing, and some of their children are dancing now. But the thing I like to say about that particular club, about 50% of it stays from year to year. In other words, next year we will have 50% of our class this year will be still dancing in that because there is no other place for singles to dance. We do have one unfortunate thing in our married couples clubs. They do not accept a single person unless they bring a partner. So we don't have a dearth of single men or single women dancing in our couples clubs. If they want to join as a couple, that's fine. That's entirely up to them. So they go back to their singles club. But variety, as Al was saying here, is the big thing, not just in your choreography, but in your music. How many of you take your latest singing calls and actually take a look at them and work them over so you can use them on your first nights? This is a must, because your older dancers are going to go out and guest, and they're going to hear that new music, and they'll wonder why you're not using it. And if you have that ability, make use of it, because it makes an awful difference to the dancer who is continually dancing at a lower level. I use that word level. It's in our phrase up there. I don't know whether it is in yours, but I know that you know what I mean. The club that we have that's been dancing for 5 years is an engineering group, would you believe? Very, very strongly oriented to choreography, believe it or not. We are only doing the first 45 basics. They meet once a month and are very, very happy dancers. They are just now thinking about enlarging their scope and forming a large square dance club within their engineering group. And they will be still the first 45 basics. Now, there must be more questions on the floor. Let's see, I'll take the first fella here who's closest to me. Come on up here.
My name is Pete Casper from the Washington, D.C. area. Really had maybe two small comments rather than a question. You know, one of them, just casual observation from a caller that's maybe been calling about 5 years rather than 25 and so forth. I feel there's a lot of rush to plus movement because mainstream in many cases is not hard enough. You can say individual callers will fall into the repetition of swing through, boys run, wheel and deal, that sort of thing. I know, when you get in small groups and we talk to each other, maybe even particularly when people get on the microphone, it's very easy to say, well, gee, we don't do that in my club. I never do that sort of stuff. But I think some self-examination probably, I think in each one of us, probably would help a whole lot. If we give those people a very interesting dance, I'm sure that maybe many of them won't need to feel they need to go up, bump one level, just to find that action. And the other quickie comment, I was kind of curious to see your comment before about do we follow the progression list, or not progression list, but the CALLERLAB listing of calls. I've heard some earlier comments in our Washington, D.C. Callers Association. That's a current area of interest. We have a letter that we've looking for an answer from CALLERLAB on the question: is that list put forth with any intention at all of being a suggested progression? And the answer was, we don't know yet. It's current. That's being examined right now. I know many of our people in our association, I'm sure as many fellows, follow that list because it's convenient. It's a printed list. It's not so bad even. But I think it might be an idea, maybe if next year, whatever, that there's probably some optimized sequence that we haven't discovered. Maybe some fellows already have discovered it yet. I don't think that list there is the optimized one. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The one comment that I have, perhaps this caller-teacher manual that sets an order is putting out will solve a lot of our teaching problems. I'm sure hoping so. How many of you have ordered it? I've had a chance to look at it, and I do feel that it will be a real adjunct to our teaching profession. I believe this gentleman is still sitting. Would you like to line up if you've got yourself a question here? But just while you're coming up, Jack, does not the list state at the top of it, this is a recommended teaching order?
Yeah.
I believe it does. He's going to check it and make sure. Yeah. The latest list that's published at this convention does not say that on the top of it, then. It only says that.
But it is a recommended list. However, and I don't see that it's written at the top or the other things that are written here that I'm picking up real quick.
Jack, you're not using the mic.
While he's coming up, maybe I could make my comment. My name is Mike Digentich from California, and as a record user, not a producer, one of the things that I think would encourage dancing at both mainstream or even basic or whatever level, would be for the caller or for the record producers to put on their records the singing call records. Put down different levels. Put down a mainstream call. Put down the plus level call. Even go down to a basic call, because frequently the callers are not going to take the time. They don't necessarily want to take the time to put together a figure to fit to that particular music or that. And I think it would be a way of encouraging the callers to use mainstream basics rather than pushing people into the plus.
That'll probably raise the price of the record to another $2 or $3. Let's let Jack up here so he can answer that question.
If it is here, I'm not picking up real quickly, but there's nothing on this that specifies that this is a recommended list, but that's true, that it is a recommended list. CALLERLAB has no ability to order anybody to do anything. And, however, I do want to emphasize to all of you that this is an extremely carefully constructed list with a major purpose of putting it in the best possible order for teaching progression. And I have to tell you that I have never taught in the same progression 2 years in a row in the 30 years I've been calling. Every year I revise my program based upon my past experiences and my objectives for this year. I made a substantial change this year between spin the top and fan the top for the very reasons that came up in our session. I now teach fan the top prior to spin the top, where before I never used fan the top very much, so I left it at the very end of my program and passed it over. But I find that it is a very fitting thing to teach that concept prior to the spin concept. So later I make a big deal out of spin concept. So I changed that this year. And I make other adjustments. So you have to understand that this list is the major reason for the list, in our opinion, is to give you our best opinion as to one of the best progressions for teaching these calls. Now there are two elements that enter into that. The agreement that we made and the recommendation we have is that change any order you want to fit your own situation, except you agree not to teach any mainstream calls till you complete the basic program. So that you are not supposed to teach any call out of a program till you complete that program. And that has been a common agreement relative to the way this list is used. So you can change the first 48 any way you want to, but don't teach the next call until you complete all of that 48. The second thing is that we have 4 criteria we follow in identifying where on a list a call goes. Some of that gets completely thrown out the window when we have some other considerations I'll mention in a minute. But the criteria are, number one, that the calls, simple calls or simple parts of calls that make up more complex calls, made up of more than one kind of a call idea, the simple parts are taught first. They're in the progression first. So that something like fan the top naturally should be in progression before spin the top in terms of that one idea. Second, that any calls that are used in several programs, like contra programs, traditional programs, one-night stands, are all to be included in the basic program. And we've tried to shift all those kinds of things into the basic program. And the third is that some consideration will be given to how difficult the call is and how many practice sessions it needs when you put it in the call list, so that you get some of these moved up early enough that they get quite a bit of practice prior to ending the program. And the fourth consideration is that if you have a possibility of negative transfer, if you have a possibility that learning one call is going to interfere with your ability to do another call, then those two calls be separated by a minimum of 6 to 10 positions on the list. Now that's how the list has been put together over a 10-year period. And we constantly are modifying and working with it, but
who's next?
My name is Steve Wendell from the Los Angeles area, and I'd like to say that it's really nice to hear that in the Canadian provinces where they square dance, they have so much cooperation between the advanced and the plus and the mainstream level clubs. Just right off the bat, I would tend to think that is going to depend on dancer frequency, and it is also going to be dependent upon population density. In the Los Angeles area, as in a lot of the other metropolitan areas, we do have a particular situation. We have a lot of dancers, and those dancers can spend a lot of time dancing. Now, this naturally pushes up the amount of time that they're going to spend in a class. It directly affects what levels they're going to be able to go to. So these are factors that the metropolitan areas have to deal with that maybe some of the more rural areas don't. Along with that idea of the population density and the amount of dancers we have, there's been kind of an unspoken attitude that has kind of crept into square dancing in the Los Angeles area, that if you are not a plus level dancer, you are not really a square dancer. And this is very unfortunate, extremely unfortunate, because that beginner that's gone through 26 weeks or 30 weeks or whatever it is a class, they have just as much right to go to dance somewhere as anybody else. They are a square dancer. The trouble is that we're running into a problem of the clubs really don't want to sponsor mainstream dances. And you also have problems getting callers who are willing to call mainstream dances. Mainstream? Hell, what's mainstream? That's only 69 calls. You have trouble hiring people to do mainstream dances. These are get some Canadian people. But I mean, these are just things that that are particular to, from what I gathered, the metropolitan areas due to the fact we've got so many dancers. The only other thing I'd like to add at this point is that it is really important that the caller take it upon himself to make an effort to sit down and write more interesting material. It's so easy for us, especially those of us that use a lot of sight calling. It is so easy for us to fall into the same old traps and the same simple calls. And it's time consuming, it's hard work, it takes a lot of hours to sit down and push that pencil and move those dolls. But this is one of the reasons that we're in exactly the problem that we are now, because the callers in the metro areas did not take that time to do that. The majority have just, they've gotten into the sight calling thing and they've just moved right along, and they've never made an effort to make a real interesting dance. And I feel this is one of the problems. We have not really taken it upon ourselves to make an interesting mainstream dance. We kind of glossed over that and ran on to the plus level. So it's important that we take that upon ourselves to make that effort. And unless we make that effort, this whole thing of mainstream is going to continue to haunt us, because we are the only ones that can change the interest of the mainstream dance. If we make it interesting, we'll get the dancers back. But if we don't make the effort, the problem is going to continue to stay with us.
Thank you. One thing that comes to mind, just one comment. He was talking about the metro area, and I think the allusion was that we're rural. Percentage-wise, I don't agree with what you're saying. I think if you take a percentage-wise in any, shall we say, city of 100 to 150,000 to even L.A., you may find that the percentage of your population that is dancing is no different. The only thing that you may have is the number of clubs. We have 11 clubs in Saskatoon that run between 9 and 12 squares apiece. And they run all the way from every level.
I'm Jim Howard here from right across the river here in New Jersey. Martin, to address to your point right there you just brought up, the gentleman from out there in L.A. area mentioned about most dancers being plus. We have the same general problem here in the Delaware Valley. We have very few mainstream clubs. We have many clubs that say they dance plus level. I'm looking forward to one I'm going to call here on the 15th of April that is a plus level club. At least that's what I found out the last time I got there. They had a little trouble with several of the figures. But really, the couple of comments I did want to make is this. I can't say how many weeks I teach a class because our particular 4-H group is kind of unique. We have about 10 4-H clubs in the state of New Jersey. Many of them teach their classes on the conventional method. They start in September, they finish sometime in May or so. My wife and I found that we had kids wanting to join. They didn't want to join in September, they wanted to join in November. They wanted to join in January. We ended up going to 2 floors. She ended up doing calling, and she's been through John Kay's classes and does a good job, and she teaches the basics. She brings them up usually to the 47, 48 that make up our basic list. From there on, I get them on, quote, the mainstream floor. I'm not even sure that in 2 years that I get them through all those figures that make up the mainstream list. They are outstanding dancers when it comes to that basic list. They know them by definition because they dance them all that way. The first half hour of our meeting nights, which are twice a month, I have everybody on the floor from the new dancer to the one that's been dancing with me for 7 years. You got to make it interesting. And I've learned to call many of those figures from many different ways. Take a look at a figure that I think is about number 18 on the list, and somebody can correct me in the number up or down, half sachet. I didn't say roll away with a half sachet. But take Gene Trimmer's notes some night that he put out on half sachet and call it to your club and watch the smiles and the friendly come up. It's a new call to them, probably, in most cases. But it's number 18 on the list. Or maybe it's number 12 or something in that number. Try divide, the same thing. Going on to another area, and it's something to think about more, to bring in kids, whether you bring them in the beginning or at the end. It goes along with the same thing with singles that you mentioned. You have one club up in that area. I would hate to say what John Carlton does, and I don't know where John disappeared. Here he is standing over here. If he could only have couples in that club he calls to down in Whiting, New Jersey, he would probably have 2 squares. It's senior citizens. And there's one heck of a lot more women out there dancing than there is that. We have the same thing with the youth groups. We take them in. John does the same thing. He teaches the girls both sides of the street, as I like to refer to it. I do the same thing with that. And there's many a 4-H night that I have called and ended up with 8 boys here and 8 girls there, and the guys will outdance the girls. And they'll have a competition back and forth. Can they dance with the callers calling? No, we're not deliberately trying to break them down by any means. But they get that spirit of fun and dancing, and that's what we try to keep it in there with them. Paul, you mentioned about dance clubs finally dropping the idea of running a class. Plus clubs running a class. And I think, as I think of it here quickly, and I would like to hear more discussion on it, if those groups ran classes, they tried to bring them up to join the club. The rush to plus, the rush to advanced level. And if they're dropping back into that, I think it is, and maybe what I'd like to leave you all and like to hear more discussion about, we put in a big plus program here about a year, 2 years ago. Well, last year, I guess it was approved. What effect has it had on mainstream? Are we getting people back, or are we moving on up? And I think it affects with the mainstream, and we've got to look at it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Mike Callahan from Hilton, New York, which is a small town outside of Rochester, New York, about 30 miles. In Rochester, it's quite a metropolitan area, and they have probably about 35 clubs in their association. One of the clubs I call for is right in my hometown in Hilton, and it's mainly made up of younger families. Friday night is their night to dance. They don't travel anywhere else. And what they do, it's sponsored by the town recreation. They dance in a school. So they don't dance in the summertime at all, okay? And so this year we tried something, talking about this transition from class to club. We started in October, and we had a half hour before the regular dance, a workshop on mainstream calls like scoot back, peel off, fan the top, things like that. And this seemed to prime, or it kind of reviewed some of these calls for the people who hadn't been dancing all summer. And it just, it gave the people more confidence when they went into the regular club dance because they were warmed up with some of these calls already. And we did this until Christmas. We worked on some of the mainstream calls. No new calls were allowed. In fact, I would say to them, what are you having trouble with? What calls would you like to do tonight? What would you like to review? And they would say, scoot back, hinge, fan the top, things like that. And after Christmas, we might stick in one of the plus calls to review. But it was a half hour, just a half hour before the dance. I'm usually there 20 minutes early anyhow. It's an extra 10 minutes. And believe me, it really helped. You just can't believe it.
I'd like to add that is one of the things that all our callers do in our area, and I neglected to mention, is that the first half hour of our evening program, most of us call with what we call theme tips in our patter. If we are going to theme something, we usually will take that first half hour and work through usually the basic movement that we are going to theme in each tip, so that they have sort of warmed up to it and gone through it. Through the summer months, as I said earlier, we do have a complete dancing program at the mainstream level for the dancers, so that transition is not a hard thing for them. Lloyd Priest, I believe, isn't it?
Yes. Lloyd Priest from Scarborough, Ontario. We stick mainly to the list because we have 4 Saturday dances in our area for our beginner dancers. Now, we start our beginner dances in November, which is after they've been dancing for 6 weeks. We take them out and we just play with them for a while until maybe the end of December. But on the back of our note services that we put out, we list all the basics and we say by the end of November, your dancers should be able to do this. By the end of December, they should be do this plus this. And we list them out chronologically in months. And then when you come out to call a dance for my beginners, you know what they can do because it's right there. And all the callers in the area pretty well stick to that list. I call a Saturday dance for beginners, and Jimmy Fraser calls a Saturday dance. My son Jeffrey over here calls a Saturday dance. So these are all on one Saturday apart. So there's 3 dances in the area that the beginner dancers can go to, and they know they're not going to get clobbered because the list is on the back there and it tells you what you should call. And as far as changing figures for singing calls, this only comes with experience. If you're going to teach a spin the top, you can put a spin the top in almost any singing call. If you're going to teach a scoot back, you can put it. And I never teach a basic, but what that basic is in that next singing call. And if they've done it 4 times, they've almost got the message that how to do a scoot back or how to do a spin the top or how to do whatever. And this also goes for the higher levels. Now, as far as transition, we move them from our beginner class into a plus class. And the plus class is a learning class. And I don't care how good a dancer they are, they stay in that class for 2 years. If they dance 9 nights a week, they still stay in that class for 2 years, or they go to somebody else. Now, most of the dancers in our area will not take a dancer unless he has danced plus for 2 years. This is an agreement that we have. And then we move them from there into our regular plus and experimental and maybe a little bit of A1. And we find that this works for us because I don't steal your dances, you don't steal my dances. This is an agreement that we have. Now, if Martin sends his dancers from Saskatoon down to Toronto, which is, 1,500 miles? And Martin says, phone Lloyd Priest when you get there and tell him you're an A1 dancer. They know that they're going to come out, and I know Martin's dancers can handle A1, and me the same. I send mine to Martin, and he knows that what they can handle. And this is the way we work it. I think what I find in the States here, and this is not derogatory, but I think that there is too much competition between callers that are trying to start in the middle of the road. Instead of having beginner classes, now I'm in kind of a unique position. I've been a full-time caller for 12 years. I have 4 clubs, and I will not let anybody into my top club until they have danced plus for 2 years. That's the rules. And if you don't like it, fine, then go and dance with somebody else. Because it is easier for me to lose one couple than to have them upset my whole club.
Thank you, Lloyd. Which plus are you talking about, Lloyd? CALLERLAB Plus, the total program.
I'm John Carlton from McGuire Air Force Base, New Jersey. The word mainstream goes a long way. I'd like to bring it a little statement of something to the effect of your dancers are a reflection of you, the caller. Now, I always looked at it in a perspective that the first person I have to be concerned with is the new dancer himself. What I want him to accomplish, what I want him to be able to do when he graduates. Because the first thing he's going to go out and say, well, John Carlton taught me how to dance. So I definitely want to turn out the best product I can possibly turn out. And that is education. Education is a major part of our teaching. We have to teach the dancer not only how to dance, we've also got to make him aware of the dancing programs, styling, every facet that he needs to know to the point that he's going to graduate from. I also teach with the attitude of DVD and APD. When those dancers walk out there, I want them to have a good fighting chance, and they walk into a club that says we're mainstream, and all of a sudden they find out that it's a little bit more than mainstream. But if I have taught those dancers well enough, and they listen to what the caller's saying, they're not going to be intimidated by any call. They'll be able to move through those moves like they've known it all along, such as moves such as a single circle to an ocean wave. So most of the time, most callers will tell you, grab both hands, circle happen, veer to a wave. If your dancers are well versed in the position of each move, if nothing else, as we say, fake it or cheat to get there, they can actually get there. Another good one is turning left through. If you've taught your dancers a good turn through and a courtesy turn, and if you've got a halfway good, decent caller that he's going to that's supposedly he's supposed to be calling a mainstream dance, but it gets a little bit above that, if he's helping them out in any way, if they have learned good basics, they won't have any trouble getting through it. The most important thing as you're bringing these people along, as you bring them along with fun, you joke with them, you kid with them, and you tell them the pitfalls as they're going along. Don't let them get the surprise. Tell these ladies and gentlemen that, well, you might see it this way, and you give them a little quickie walk through. You don't have to bomb them all night with this stuff in class, but give them an idea that it's coming. It's going to be there. There's no way around it. Then you come to the portion of transition. That's tough. Transition from your classes into the club. My particular club, as you've been heard before, is a plus senior citizens club. But they are good plus dancers. But I do not move my class into my club. I hold them, I dance them all summer long. Strictly at mainstream level. No more. Now, they're doing some plus moves. They don't know it because I position them through it. I've actually taught it to them psychologically. They don't know they've been taught. But when I start in the fall, I start a plus class. Not a plus workshop, but a plus class. And it's just like going back through one more time. But this time, the moves are a little bit tougher. Now they're going to pick up the moves. And all of a sudden they say, well, we've done that before. I says, yes, but you did it with mainstream terminology. And all of a sudden, they're settled in. They feel comfortable. They are now getting through. And I also, when I get them through that summer, and they're going to the plus class, I also say, come back to the regular class as an angel. Go back through the mainstream program one more time. Strengthen, double your knowledge. And then all of a sudden, bingo, you are there. But once I got them through there, they say, mainstream isn't bad. So all of a sudden, I got people dancing mainstream, and I can call mainstream any direction that you can think of. And they'll get through it. And they'll have a good time, laughing, cutting up, and carrying on. The idea is dancer attitude. You keep the dancers going. And then, most of all, caller education. We need stronger callers. You can remember dancers first, club second, and caller third, and the dancers are a reflection on you. You all will be very successful in your club.
I would like to have another comment from our three board members, panel members, before we wind it up. If you two guys have something to say, can you keep it short?
I'll keep it real short. I'm Dick Holbert from Central Florida. This gentleman's question about plus clubs teaching classes. I have a plus club in New Smyrna Beach, and we are teaching a class, but we are expanded where we give a full program of square dancing. We have both a night for plus and a night for mainstream. And when my people graduate, they dance in the mainstream class, which is caller run, by the way. The mainstream part of the club is caller run. And that way they don't have any responsibilities of office or watching the door or taking the money or anything. And there's no push on them to move up to plus until they get absolutely ready to. And no, I don't push them at all. If they want to move up to plus, that's fine. I'll run workshops or classes or whatever you wish. But we have the vehicle there that when they graduate from class, they can dance in mainstream until they want to move up.
You need that. Seems to me I heard you before at the other place.
Oh, I'm always spouting my mouth off. Kenny Ferris from Maryland. I just want to make a comment. Nothing personal against Lloyd Priest, but I don't think you should be at this committee meeting if you're not calling mainstream. And from what I gather, you have plus clubs. And I think anybody that's going to come to a mainstream session ought to be calling mainstream clubs. This is what we're talking about. Not mainstream is a program. It's a program where clubs dance at. It's not just some little stepping stone along the way. It's a bona fide group of calls, and people do square dance at mainstream level. And I want to make that comment. And also, I just wanted to say I think it's rather disgusting to take people through their beginners classes in the mainstream and then throw them into a plus workshop. And I see this in my area, and I see it a lot of places. At the end of May, you graduate them, and then you say, okay, now you got to get in the plus workshop. And we're sitting here talking about, but how many guys are going to go back home and do this summer? They're going to graduate their guys in May, then they say, plus workshops on Monday nights. Okay? We've done something in our area, Lou Popowski back here, and another caller and myself have put together a mainstream summer series every Friday night. 2 different callers get together. This is what every area needs, is the callers to get together and sponsor a mainstream summer program where they don't have to do anything but dance mainstream in the summertime. Too many people take vacations to try to run a workshop in the summer. I think it's kind of silly. And in the fall, first of all, I don't think they ought to go into a plus workshop in the fall, but if somebody's going to have a plus workshop in the fall, and if you can't keep your newest dancers out of it, it ought to be recommended that, I'm almost done, ought to be recommended that if you're going to be dancing taking a plus workshop, you should also be required to be dancing mainstream someplace, okay? Because you have to be dancing mainstream all the time for a foundation. Thank you.
Perhaps we should take a motto that mainstream is really where it's at. Mike, you were first man on. I'm going to ask Elmer to be first man on to rebuttal. Sorry. No, just very quickly. I think we're all aware of, like Kenny was just saying, that this particular meeting is really to discuss mainstream, and we're all aware that we should keep our mainstream programs fun for the dancers. The transition from class to club is a big step for lots of reasons. Most of the time, I don't know how you work it, but our classes are on different nights, for one thing, than the club. So right away, if you're teaching class on Monday and you have your graduation, you say, okay, starting Saturday, you now can join our club. So they have the transition already from not just from changing from a teaching process to a dancing type situation, but also a different night. They're going to see people that they haven't seen during class. So all these things you need to think about and really try to hold that dancer's interest and let them have a good time, and let your club dancers that are already there know that you've just spent 36 to 40 weeks bringing these people into square dance, and let's try to keep them in there. Okay? Thank you. I think, Elmer, that's the biggest transition, is not so much from mainstream to plus, is the night. They become very habit formed in that night that they are dancing. You never changed position.
Right, I'm the middleman. I consider myself a communicator in working with my dancers. In order for any form of communication to be effective, you must have a sender, you must have a receiver. I'm the sender portion of my communication. I'd like to leave you with just a proverb from a very wise gentleman, my father, who used to tell me to communicate to express, not to impress.
No, I'd just like to say in review that all of us, no matter what the dancing situation is in our particular area, all of us have the ability to provide leadership to steer the dancing activity and the mainstream activity and the new dancing activity in a proper direction. And for some of us in areas like Los Angeles and metropolitan areas where there is predominantly plus dancing, we have a long road to hoe. But many of us have been in the activity a long, long time and plan to be in the activity a long time in the future. And I think if we're patient and provide the proper leadership, that in time those gaps will be filled in, and we'll have a comprehensive square dance program for everybody, no matter what their level of interest or involvement.
Just in closing, I feel that we've all really said the same thing, and that is that we as callers must provide a total program. You can't go in and provide just cake. You've got to get down to the meat and potatoes. You've got to serve a complete meal. Because if you don't, the people are going to get choked on what they're being fed. We firmly believe that even the basic list is as important as your challenge levels. The only difference is that you have more dancers at your lower end. It's a pyramid. And the only way you can get to the top of that pyramid is to start at the bottom and work your way through. And I think that's what we've got to do as leaders.